Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey, and how you doing? And hello and all that. And it's, whatever. It's September 9, the day before, the day I've been waiting for an awful long time, which is the 10th. And that's because there's a debate I've been anxious about, to say the least. For anyone who heard me belching prior to the show, I apologize. I forget to mute my mic even when the stream has already started, and I'm sitting here guzzling my only source of caffeine, which is a Diet Coke, and invariably that begets a belch, and I'm good at that. I mean, I let some buttes go, and I think you've been hearing them, and I'm embarrassed. But I keep forgetting about the mic. I either don't turn it off or I don't turn it on. God dang it. Anyway, good Lord, as is often the case on a Monday, there is so much to talk about. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to those of you who I met and saw and spoke with at the Parkway Theater in McKees Rocks on Saturday night, who came to that thing that John McIntyre put on. And wow, yeah, it was just lovely getting to talk to some of you whom I've never met and seen, and delightful. And it was an interesting evening to listen to oh, for God's sake, Cullen. I'm so concerned about pronouncing it properly. Kahari Mosley recount his just unbelievably outrageous story of he and his wife, now Judge Chelsea Wagner, being arrested in Detroit. A story that became a huge local story here, and in fact a story in Detroit. They both eventually were acquitted, and they now have a case pending against the hotel that did just treated him with just outrageous racism, calling in the Detroit police, and then the Detroit police going one step further and treating his wife with extraordinary disrespect as well, and just unbelievable story of racism and misogyny and corrupting power, and oh my God. So anyway, there was that, and it was to hear it from the horse's mouth. He's got I think that's where I was going. He has a case, he and his wife, was Marriott hotel chain in which these unfortunate events unfolded some 4 years ago. And that case is about to come to fruition, and I got the distinct impression that he and she, Chelsea Wagner, are going to be coming into some money, courtesy of the legal system and the Marriott hotel chain. So whatever. There was that, and then there was Bethany Hallam, who's a county council person, who told just another gut-wrenching story about being a high school student athlete who gets injured and then injured a second time, and with surgeries and doctors happily dispensing all kinds of painkillers, opiates to her. And even in rehab, the opiates kept coming, and how she got hooked, and how that took her down a horrific rabbit hole into addiction, into heroin eventually, into a life of crime to support her habit, into uh, losing everything, uh, everything, her driver's license, her home, her family, everything. And then somehow, with the help of a mentor, making a choice and making a change, and how it was throwing herself into politics at the time, because it was just after Donald Trump's election and women were in the streets, and she joined that, having never been political before. And the next thing you know, rather than shooting heroin, she was doing politics 24/7, and then ended up where she is. And it is a extraordinary story of somebody pulling themselves back up from hell, from the bottom. So it was interesting, uh, and thank you again for those who were there to hear our stories. Mine was the most lighthearted of the evening. Good God, I thought they were going to be funny stories. They were not funny. Um, all right, so to the thing at hand. Good God, polls, schmoles. We love them when they report things we want to hear. We You belched. It was in the wrong key, but you did it right. Oh, I'm so mortified. I really am a very sort of, I only belch with family members. My son and I are great belchers. I know we've appalled some people who've been with us at dinner when we forget that they're not used to us behaving so badly. My parents would freak. I'm sorry. God dang it! I gotta make a sign here that says Mike. Just says Mike. So poll schmoles, and yeah. So the first major poll out in a while shows Trump ahead. The Times Siena poll. Well, fuck that. I was looking at some of this polling, and even if this polling is like really off, it's still terrifying because it says here that this is the New York Times Siena poll. Overall, it says 46% of likely voters have a favorable view of Donald Trump. 46%. I mean, if it were, I I bump into people who still like tell themselves it's just a third of the country that's gone batshit crazy. This suggests more like getting close to half. And it says that a near majority, this is the one that blows my mind, says that Trump, they see him as at the center of the political landscape. And they say he's not left, he's in the center. And it says that only, here's the third, only 1/3, but it's us, only 1/3 say he's too far right. Anyway, this poll, there's other horrific things on it. Don't want to even give it a moment's thought, but it suggests that we should. And all of this sort of pre-congratulatory crapola I'm hearing from Harris supporters, we need to stop that right now and run like we're behind, okay, up until the final vote. Relax, Lynn. It was quite tasteful in comparison to my niece, who can out-belch truckers. still gives me little solace. All right, so yeah, there's that. Harris is finally decamping from Pittsburgh today, and this afternoon she's, I suspect, heading off to Philly to get ready for tomorrow. Whatever, she's leaving. It's weird she holed up here. I mean, if you're going to hole up anywhere, why? It's not as though she was campaigning. She made one little stop in the Strip. It's interesting. I don't know. So, I've got so much stuff here, and I don't know where to blah, 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 blah. The orange horror. Let me just dispense with a few other stories somewhat related to him, if not centered on him, and then we can be done with him for the rest of the show, which would please me much. So I happened to read a very long article in Atlantic this morning, and it was written by a guy named Leibovich, who has been following Trump for a long, long, long time. And in fact, in 2015, before he was elected, but at the incipient stage of his presidential run, this guy was following him around and talking to him. And Trump, at that point, before he actually won, which we historically now know shocked the hell out of him, he was more forthcoming, more open about how he saw things. You think he isn't open now. He just, just blathers on and on, this nonsense that comes out of his mouth. He was less nonsensical and more sort of, I would say, specific in talking to this guy back in the day. And what he told him, that this guy wrote the story about, is how he, Trump, fully knew and fully intended to knock off every other Republican challenger. He didn't necessarily think he was going to get elected, but he had no problem looking at the people he was running against for the Republican nomination that he was going to win. And Leibovich says that one theme that Trump kept pounding over and over again when he would speak to him was he would say things like, you gotta understand, we're dealing with brutal, vicious killers. What? And this is how he always saw his competitors in the private sector, in real estate, in TV, in the casinos. Brutal, vicious killers. Sorry, I mucked that up. He said this is who he's always dealt with. He called it the big boys. And he knew how to deal with them. And as he looked at Ted Cruz, all the others who wanted the nomination, he saw them as saps. He didn't see them as brutal, vicious killers. He saw them as weak. He says they're not strong. And Leibovich was, taking notes left and right. So he has them Trump at calling them their puppets. They're not strong. He said, I love their contempt of me because it'll make me even more satisfied when I make them kneel. Good God. He said, this is a quote, they might speak badly about me now, but they won't later. They like to say they're public servants. And Leibovich noted that his voice was dripping with derision at the word servant. But he went on to say they will eventually submit to me. Quote, it'll be very easy. I can make them evolve. They will evolve. This is Trump in 2015 saying he's going to take every one of these weak sisters down. And you know, he did. This article goes on to showcase each one, including those who weren't running for the nomination, like McConnell and Lindsey Graham, and shows the absolute condemnations of Trump that they publicly uttered, calling him every name in the book, calling him unfit. Some of them saying they would never, ever support him. And how one after another bowed down. It's one of the aspects of his takeover of the Republican Party that still astonishes a lot of people, including me, because what we didn't know that Trump did was how craven, how weak these politicians were. He knew he could take every single one. And you look at who he didn't take, and it's next to none of them. Liz Cheney. She turns out to be, it's interesting, is it not? And when history is written, how it's invariably almost women who have stood up to him, while men cave. Not all. But this is an article about, it's fascinating, about how Trump looked at them, the Republicans, and he saw spineless cowards who he could take with no problem. And he did. And he now owns the party. So, just saying, I thought that was fascinating. If you get a point to see it, go for it. The other thing I want to discuss is, I think it was on Tuesday that when my sister was, speaking with dripping contempt of Trump voters, and I had just read Nicholas Kristof's article suggesting that the contempt and I was going to say condensation, and contempt and con, that's condescension. God, condescension and condemnation and a lot of other cons that we so often rain down on Trump voters is not only politically stupid, but it is somehow morally offensive. And I found his article, pretty powerful, so I shared some of it with you. And because I am easily made to feel guilt. It's, you want to make me feel guilty? Go. I mean, you can be a real first timer in that undertaking, and you'll take me down. Seriously, talk about a weak sister. So I was happy to see somebody take on Christoph in print for that article. And it was Matt Bay, Bai. And I'm just going to share a few of his comebacks to that. He says, so Christoph's talking about we're supposed to have empathy and understanding for 8 years of his bigotry and his constant, lies. And then Bay says, to say that Trump's voters aren't aware of the lies and everything else, or don't fully comprehend them for some reason, or are just in the grip of Fox News misinformation, is actually to say then that they're just what? Fools. And Bay says, and I've met far too many rural Americans to believe that. If they are ignorant, they are willfully ignorant. And then he says something that is fascinating to me, and it's smart. He says, you see, the problem with Christoph's argument that we're being condescending to these people who buy Trump, that argument, calling us condescending, is itself condescending. Condescending in its own way. It's condescending to say that these people somehow are so easily played, right? Oh, these poor fools. They don't know. They've fallen for. And he goes on to say, one would assume that Christoph feels less empathy for the Trump voters with MBAs and law degrees, the ones who hang their Trump flags at their beach houses, who would throw their dog under an oncoming train if it meant, another tax cut. And without those Trump voters, all the rural towns and farmland in America wouldn't be enough to get Trump elected. And then he goes on. And as for other Trump voters, I'd assume he says that Christoph would have less empathy for the genuine racists, the white nationalists, who had long been, at home under rocks in our cultural scene, who've now crawled out from under them with Trump and the MAGA movement. And he goes on to say, but somehow, when it's the long suffering, white, working class voter we're talking about, the Trump sign in the yard should be read as an act of some kind of blind nobility. I mean, Trump is just so entertaining. How are such decent, hardworking Americans supposed to understand they're being had? And Bay goes on thusly. These voters don't support Trump because they think that he's going to rescue their communities. Not anymore. They know he won't. They support him because he's willing to blow up the country if it means teaching insufferable intellectual elitists a lesson. It's the same vengeful impulse that leads an autocracy in unequal societies all over the world, that leads to autocracy in all societies all over the world. It is at its core unpatriotic, no matter how many flags they fly or how many rationalizations they come up with. They want to take down those who they perceive as over them. And then Bay says, and there are countless Americans, like the ones that Christoph describes, people whose communities have been devastated by job loss and substance abuse, who still manage to keep their faith in moral leadership and in the Constitution, and who want nothing to do with Trump's brand of hate and vengeance. And if anyone deserves empathy, it is them. Matt Bay in the Washington Post. I think well done. Oh, and then Heather Cox Richardson, who I follow on Substack, she's the historian who always has a historical view of what's happening, puts it in that kind of a context. She happened to be paying attention this weekend to Trump, and she said she wasn't going to write about him this weekend, but then she heard him. She heard him in Mosinee, Wisconsin, and her blood ran cold. And she thought, I've got to write something about how much more deranged and he sounds, how much more he's sort of bringing back a lot of the vengeful bloodlust that we have heard intermittently. And she says that she feels like, as a historian, she feels the need to leave notes for someone 150 years from now who's trying to make something out of how Americans lost their collective minds. I mean, there is no end to some of the things he said over the weekend. There was a news conference he gave that was insane. There was the event in Wisconsin. She says if you listen to him, I mean, it is deranged, and he's slurring words. He called Elon Musk Leon Musk. He forgot the name of the governor of North Dakota who was on his short list for vice president, Doug Burgum. But she said his rhetoric is increasingly apocalyptic, and he's dropping red flags left and right for absolutely echoes. Sorry if we he echoes Russian talking points to an astonishing degree. NATO. I mean, that's just written for him by the Kremlin. He went on to tell them that schools in America are performing gender affirming surgery on children. And he said this, can you imagine you're a parent and your son leaves the house and you say, Jimmy, I love you so much. Go have a good day at school. And your son comes back with a brutal operation. Can you even imagine this? What the hell is wrong with our country? I mean, it's astonishing. And then he went after the immigrants again. If we don't win Colorado, we'll be taken over by migrants. Migrants and crime at level is saying that. You're being overrun by criminals. If you think you have a nice house, have a migrant enjoy your house, because a migrant's going to be taking it over. It'll be Venezuela on steroids. And then he went on to how he's going to get rid of them all. And he said this, and getting rid of them will be a bloody story. And he said this, every citizen who's sick and tired of the parasitic political class that sucks our country of its blood and treasure, November 5th will be your liberation day. November 5th this year will be the most important day in the history of our country, because we're not going to have a country anymore if we don't win. I will prevent World War III, and I am the only one that can do it. I will prevent World War III, and if I don't win this election, Israel will be gone. I better win. He went on and on and on and on and on. I'm getting a lot of, I know I'm breaking up here and there. I mean, I'm getting a thing saying in front of me on my screen, YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. I don't do video. Jesus H. So, guys, I don't know. I hope you're still able to hear me. God damn it. Beth writes, I was having the same thoughts. Why was she here doing her debate prep? It's not like Braybender and Cox are helping her. That's a local outfit that helps Republicans. Then I started to think of the amount of late night show writers and talent that have Pittsburgh roots. Could they be in town quietly helping her with prep, as they know how to get under Donald's orange skin? Seth Meyers' father's families from the writers from Fallon's What Writers' Room are from or lived in Pittsburgh. Howard Stern's in-laws are in Pittsburgh. Howard is someone who knew Donald and is absolutely opposed to his presidency and would be a fabulous Donald in getting Kamala prepped. If they are seen in town, they could just be visiting family. That was my thought, my fantasy of why she might be in Pittsburgh. I'm sorry if the audio's breaking up too. Oh, dang it. Are we sort of okay now? I'm just going to keep on going unless things get so bad. I've got something wonderful to share with you. It's an obituary. I hope I don't go out during this obit. And it's an obit that one of you sent me, knowing how much I love a good obituary. Man, this one is unbelievable. A woman in Maine called Florence Harrelson. And this is the obit. It's short, so I will read it in toto. Florence Flo Harrelson, age 65, formerly of Chelsea, died on February 22, 2024, without family by her side due to burnt bridges and a wake of destruction left in her path. Florence did not want an obituary or anyone, including family, to know she died. That's because even in death, she wanted those she terrorized to still be living in fear, looking over their shoulders. So this isn't so much an obituary, but more of a public service announcement. Jeez! I mean, that was an obit that ran. I can't believe the newspaper ran it. God bless them. And it was put there by her daughter, who then was blown away because obviously something that extraordinary went viral, and so she told a bigger story about her mother, and her mother was like a monster. The woman who wrote the obit has childhood memories of having her mother and her, I don't know, stepfather or boyfriend hold her by the ankles on a bridge, hanging over the bridge, laughing, threatening to, to drop her, stuff like that. It's just like nightmare stuff. And so, yeah, this woman died alone. There was no, she was, and here's how the daughter didn't know. Nobody knew. So the daughter, who said she hadn't spoken to her mother in over a decade, says she only discovered what had happened after she was having a conversation with a friend about how things were too quiet lately. So she ended up Googling her mother's name, and a death notice from a crematorium came up. So she messages her mother's sister, her aunt, who was also the identical twin of the lovely Flo Harrelson. And she texted her aunt, "Did mom die?" And the identical twin wrote back, "I don't know." Not like, "Oh my God, what?" No, I don't know. Totally not interested, this and that. So the daughter digs around, and I discovered, she said, it was her. She died. I love that, how it always says so and so died with family by their side. Now she says she died without family by her side. This isn't an obituary as much as it is a public service announcement. Wow! Wow! That's a beaut. Jeez. Laura writes, "My husband didn't want me to tell people when he died. I didn't do an obit because they cost too much." Isn't, we've talked about that. People should not have to pay. I mean, newspapers are so desperate for money that now you have to pay an arm and a leg to let people know someone in your family has died. And a lot of people can't afford it, let alone a funeral, right? God. Anyway, Laura writes, "I didn't do an obit because they cost too much here. I didn't tell his family per his wishes. But I did leave that task to my daughter." Oh, wow. Well, God, families are interesting. Oh my God. Oh my God. Hey, the Washington Post did a big piece today about how Democrats in Butler County are living in fear. Yeah, they were in it. Some of them were had full names, but some people would only talk to the reporter using, you know, one their first name or because they were afraid of blowback from their lovely neighbors in Butler. Do you? But yes, of course you believe it. Of course you believe it. My God. The only Democrat on the county, I don't know if it's a council or board of supervisors or whatever there's one Democrat. After the Trump assassination attempt, he texted the Republican, I don't know if it's the head of the whatever, I should have the article here, a Republican woman who is also on the council with him, and said, "Oh my God, is there anything I can do for help? Is there whatever?" And she wrote back, amongst other things, "Burn in hell." Oh, unbelievable. Or not. I remember when some years ago I started referring to these folks as fascists. I think I started with, neo fascists. I sort of tiptoed into, yeah, ultra nationalist. Little by little, and then people started saying, I might have used Nazi once or twice, and people started saying, you're hyperbolic. It's ridiculous. It's not helpful. And I'm sorry, guys. You gotta use the right words. This is no time for polite obfuscation. Um, and if you read anything about the guests that Tucker Carlson had on his podcast, which has one of the big, believe me, they got more than 1,000 listeners. It's one of the biggest podcasts in the country. Hmm. He had a known Holocaust denier on who he um, introduced as the most important historian working in the United States today. And this is a guy who he interviewed for, I believe, 2 hours, who reframed the entire war, that would be World War II, in terms wholly favorable to Hitler. He's called the biggest villain of World War II, not Hitler, but Winston Churchill. He actually said that Hitler tried desperately to avoid war with Europe. Yeah, that's why he. I mean, no, don't even. I need to start, you know, talking back. There's no need to. This is insanity. Uh, and he said millions of people ended up dead in concentration camps. The Nazis were overwhelmed by us and couldn't properly care for these fine people that they had, for some reason, put in these camps. Now, another right wing radio host, Eric Erickson, heard all this, and he put out on X, Twitter, wow, didn't expect Tucker to become an outlet for Nazi apologetics. And you know what? Here's what I want to say. Well, bullshit. Full on now, Nazi. There's no effort to hide it. There's a pride in it. Stuff like this. And whose column was it? Michelle Goldberg saying, you know, this guy, this Nazi historian guy, she said that his and others now who are taking on the narrative of what we all know of World War II are just doggedly going to continue to chip away. This is how, again, I've always said they play the long game. And little by little, they will weaken the quarantine that has been imposed since World War II in the Western world against Nazism. And the fact that the Republican Party is now a full-on nationalist, white nationalist party, cult of personality, a la Nazis, it makes it easier for others on the right to join the fold. And it makes it harder for the few who have any backbone, and we've already spoken of the fact that very, 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 we can see it, very few have shown to have any. And because there's no real Republican Party left, there is no one in any position of authority on their side to push back or punish or isolate these new fascists. Anyone who thinks that November 5th is not without a doubt, the most important day in our lives. Wow. Enough. I gotta talk to you about Doritos. Did you see the article about Doritos? I'm not kidding you. You think I'm kidding. I can see you think I'm kidding. And I am not. Let me find it. This is a story, Washington Post, out of a scientific, it was in the journal Science, lest you think I'm making this up. What's something you can say about Doritos immediately? That if you're eating them, what happens to your fingers? Right, they turn orange because Doritos have this disgusting orange food dye in them, and it is called, let me find it. Well, it's tartrazine. That's the chemical that is found in yellow dye number 5. So scientists at Stanford took tartrazine and they rubbed it onto the stomachs and the scalps and the legs of mice. And I kid you not, I will read directly from the report. About 5 minutes later, the skin of the mice transformed into a living window, revealing blood vessels, muscle fibers, contractions of the gut. They became invisible. The skin just became like a window with the Doritos smeared on them. I kid you not. Well, I got to tell you, they go on to try to explain how this might seem like unbelievable. Like, what? You mean you can really make skin disappear? But they're saying the fact that they found this means that you could actually end a lot of kinds of diagnostic surgeries, right? Just pour some of that Dorito crap on me, doc, and let's have a look at what's going on there in my heart, right? So, I mean, this is really groundbreaking. Uh, and then they go into trying to explain why it does it. I mean, because there is and it has to do with the science of optics, and they lose me. I just can't. Uh, but the reality, this is a real big step toward getting rid of the scalpel as a way to find out what's going on under our skin. Here's one of the scientists quoted. You could see through the mouse. Working in optics for 30 years, and that was just jaw-dropping. So this can be used to diagnose tumors without surgery, uh, locate a vein that needs to be. I mean, and this other guy trying to explain it says it's not like Harry Potter. We're not making an invisibility cloak here. So you have to figure out. I will read this to those of you who have a better scientific bent than I. You have to consider the reason things look opaque in the first place. The bits of our body, proteins, fluids, cell membranes, all cause light to refract or bend. If light bends just once, think of a beam of sunlight hitting a sheet of glass, the image it carries is still mostly clear. But as light refracts over fluids and proteins and other cellular stuff, it scatters in lots of directions. And all that scattered light still makes it hard to see through, sort of like watching TV through a glass of milk or something. But by applying physics principles, I just doesn't. The researchers were able to screen for molecules that they predicted would, when absorbed by the body, change how biological tissues refract light. And they hit on this tartrazine dissolved in water. And then they soaked a slice of raw chicken in the tartrazine and found that the chicken turned clear. And as they increased the amount, they then rubbed it into the skin of mice, and voila, They saw right through the mice. And then as soon as the dye is washed off, the mice go back to normal. So this has not been tested yet in humans. So, you're thinking, well, I've had that orange crap all over my fingers and I couldn't see through them. Well, because that's not exactly how it was done. But is that not the most amazing thing ever? They saw through mice essentially after rubbing Doritos on them. If I were you, I wouldn't eat any more of that shit. I mean, seriously. God. Can't make it up. I had another story here, but I just don't have time, and it's about flies vomiting. A number of wondrous things in the science section. So, why is Margaret asking me how Sally Wiggin is? I haven't spoken to Sally in a while, but last time I did, she was fine. Oh, she's just being Sally. So there's that. So much to talk to you about, so little time. Susan will be joining us tomorrow, and I'll leave for Susan the other subjects I want to take up, including this charging of the parents of school shooters with murder or involuntary manslaughter or whatever they're being charged with, this being the second case. I want to talk about that because it's big. Milton just said something. Let me get it in before we. It isn't. Oh, is this too long? It's too long. It's for me to read later and maybe share with you. It's a woman journalist who had just been thrown. This is 1941. Written by Dorothy Thompson, who was in Germany in 41, and she was thrown out. She was lucky she wasn't arrested and killed. Thrown out for writing articles, true articles about what was happening there. She had also interviewed Hitler himself, and she wrote this article about how one can predict who will become a Nazi. Oh, this is fascinating. I will very happily read that, Milton. Thank you. It ain't me, babe. No, it ain't me, babe. But it sure as hell is a whole lot of other folks, some of whom might be living next door. Some of whom might be your doctor, your dentist, your lawyer, your teacher, your relative. God help us. All right, that's it for me. Fly vomit tomorrow as well. And I think that'll do it. Are you loving the weather? God knows. Man, sorry for all the ins and outs today. I have no control of that. For that matter, I have no control of much anything.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.